today in our session, we will be discussing more about stakeholder engagement. So this is the fifth in our series around the Continuity of Learning Playbook. And our interest has really been to try to help people to see what are some great tools and resources, what are some ways in which we can curate resources around distance learning, hybrid learning, and making sure that those wonderful resources that exist out there really get into the hands of our users, but also that we highlight some folks who've been doing this work, who can provide a perspective from a place of learning, of sharing. And so I'm grateful today to be able to have Dr. Daniel Assisi, who's our partner with Copernicus. We also have Mary Walters, who's the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services at Murrieta Valley. We also have with us Dr. Matthew Tessier, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Innovation and Instruction at Chula Vista Elementary School District. We also have Dr. Gloria Cerisa, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction at Chula Vista Elementary School District. And we also have Lisette Diaz, who is the Director of English Learners, Ontario Montclair School District. And I am Dr. Carla Estrada, Director of Systems Improvement and Innovation at the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. Thank you, group, for being with us today. Again, as you're coming in, please make sure that you are going through today to insert your name as well as the organization you're with, so we know who's with us today. So our session outcomes. So today we look to answer these questions, really looking at stakeholder engagement from an LEA perspective and how to prepare for the upcoming school year. We also have strategies for that engagement, and especially for engaging your community. And also we want to learn from our LEAs how they've been planning for equity, access, and continuity of learning in unprecedented times. We know that as we are all engaging in this kind of planning process, both for what we've been experiencing, but also what we are learning from recent trailer language bill that was adopted just on Friday, there is also a need for learning continuity and attendance plans. And so today, the biggest piece is stakeholder engagement. So how do we use that stakeholder engagement as an opportunity to truly be able to engage, but also build the type of learning experiences we want our kids to be able to have as we think into the new school year. Next slide. One thing as a reminder, so again, this is the fifth of our webinar series, but you'll see that we've had a variety of webinars that we've put together that highlight specific tools within the Continuity of Learning Playbook, as well as just reflections. If you get a moment to go back and look at those webinars, I'd really encourage you to do so. We will be putting the link in the chat so that way you can see what people, you can go directly to our previously recorded webinars and resources. I'd encourage you to do that. We've had things going from overarching review of the playbook to going into creating schedules, both for distance learning and hybrid, as well as sessions that are more focused on each of those topics. Again, welcome to the stakeholder engagement, which is our fifth webinar series, and we are excited to be able to dive more deeply. I'm going to hand it over to Daniel, who will now share a brief overview of the Continuity of Learning Playbook.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you for taking the time to join us in this webinar. I won't take much of your time, but I do want to share with you a little bit about what are the Continuity of Learning Playbooks and where you can find them. The CCEE had heard from many different stakeholders that LEAs were struggling to make sense of so many different documents and guidances and information in general during these very difficult times. So they sought us out to help them build two different playbooks that could help LEAs, especially those LEAs that could be perhaps resource constrained at this point in time, to help navigate what learning and teaching could look like in this next phase of COVID response. So the result of it was this website that you see on your screen here, the address, and in a little bit I'm going to show it to you as well, k12.playbook.cce acee-ca.org. It's an easy place to go to find these different resources that we have curated from dozens of experts in California and outside of California of how you could start your planning process to plan for the year ahead. Again, this is meant to be a list of resources that were aggregated and curated to help you start your planning process. Because we know there's so much information out there, sometimes it's difficult for you to even know where to start. And so we wanted to create this place that you can leverage, come back to as many times as you want to, if you want to bookmark it, because it also continues to adapt and grow. And we'll talk about it a little bit. But basically, we also want to make sure we take the time to explain that we have two different playbooks on the same website. One is the Distance Learning Playbook. And by distance learning, we mean teaching and learning that takes place when there's no in-person interaction, such as a case when early on we all had to kind of run back into distance learning earlier in March. And by hybrid learning, we mean when there is some in-person interaction taking place. And the reason why we have done two different playbooks is because we know that right now, hopefully everything is going to continue to get better, but during the semester at one point in time, there might be a need to shift from some in-person interaction, given guidance, given health guidance that might come along the way, back into no in-person interaction. So we wanted to make sure that we give you good resources there. The two playbooks have 9 different sections, and they are the same sections, and they start with the same 3 sections as well: setting goals, creating schedules, and communicating your plan. If nothing else, this is the big takeaways that we want you to have a chance to kind of vet and think about a little bit in more details. And you're going to be able to see that the entire playbook is sort of like a choose your own adventure mode. You can get directly to the information that you want. But in addition to the 3 different slides, the 3 different sections, we also have 6 other sections that gather resources for you. And they obviously vary, but we feel that they're very important. Assessment, trauma-informed SEL, capacity building, English learners, special education, and support programs. We also want to make sure that we point out that we also we're very intentional about interweaving equity considerations throughout. We didn't think that equity deserved is not the right word. We didn't think that equity should be placed as a separate section. We think that because equity underlies everything we do, we should have it everywhere in the playbook. So let me show you a little bit what we mean by that and how the playbook actually looks. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Well, I'm going to change the way I share my screen here really quickly and show you the website. If you visit the website, this is what you see. And this address, and you're going to see that we try to make it very actionable because we know that you're busy and you're looking for information that is of quality, that is relevant, and that's useful. And so right in the beginning, you are going to see a link to a previous webinar explaining what the Continuity of Learning Playbooks are. You're going to find some key questions to help you understand our motivation and how we thought about putting these resources together here. And from the beginning, like we said, you're going to find a direct link to all the equity considerations that we have interwoven throughout the document. If you want to find them in one place, you can, but they are also fine throughout. So from the beginning, you can pick a different playbook. We're going to go into hybrid mode here. You're going to see those different sections. And again, we want to highlight this web format because we know that the environment is always changing, and we did not want you to end up with a PDF that was out of date. So the format of our playbooks is dynamic, it's online, so that we can keep updating and adding resources. And if you feel there's a resource that we're missing or that perhaps others can benefit from, please reach out. We'll be glad to review it and see if we can find a way of making it find its way in there. And I'm just going to pick one session here to show you. I'm going to pick Communicate a Plan. You're going to see that's really easily laid out. It's really concise and to the point. We have the title. We have a leading question. We also have the why this is important to consider right now. And we go into the hows. We do different bullet point formats here so that you can easily see and differentiate the information that you're accessing. And you also are going to find that the spirit of the playbooks really is to offer you resources. So for instance, here we have lots of different sample letters that you can just click on and actually access it. They are all here on Google Docs. And if you just want to take it and individualize that, you can. You can even go there and make a copy and for yourself and use it. We wanted to put the information at your fingertips. And then, as we mentioned, we have some equity considerations here, and we also give you more tools and more resources that you can dive into should you be willing and ready to dive deeper into the topic. In this particular topic, communication, for instance, that's a great tool here, a resource that you can have that the CCE built, for instance, with WestEd, that you can go and do some more planning, more detailed planning in general to craft your communications plans if you so wish. So in general, we just want to make sure you know that this resource is there for you, that you can bookmark it or visit it as often as you like, and go back and use it as a reference point to guide your thinking or to pressure test your thinking and to help you have a starting point from which you can plan and get ready to what we hope is going to be a productive semester ahead of us, or beginning of term. So that's a quick tour of our Continuity of Learning Playbooks. We just want to make sure you know that there is a webinar with more details on it, should you need to explore it in more detail. But now what we really want to do is turn it over to our experts. So I'm really excited to turn over to Dr. Cerisa and Dr. Tessier from Chula Vista Elementary School District to walk us into sharing some of their stakeholder management and engagement experiences.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. It's really a pleasure to be here. I want to thank everybody for joining this webinar, and just also want to thank CCEE and all of our county offices of education for providing these resources during a time when there really isn't much of a template on how to shut down and open up and be malleable, and what our circumstances may dictate. So Chula Vista Elementary School District, we are the largest K-6 in the state of California. We service approximately 30,000 students. About 56% of our kids are living at or below the poverty line, and we also have about 30% of our kids learning English as a second language. And so the education of a child, as I'm sure you all can appreciate, really doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen just with the district office. It has to include a really robust process that includes our families, that includes our business partners, includes our faith-based community, everybody, because we do believe that the old saying that it takes a village to raise a child, that is certainly true. And so Dr. Cerisa and I are going to go over how we help engage our families, and we're honored to share this with you in case it helps your district in moving forward. And I want to specifically point out the two pieces you see here. You heard Daniel talk about what CCEE and their playbooks include, but here's two specific parts. We're going to talk about the communication plan today, and how is it that we inform, listen, and engage with our families, because relationships and trust, they really, really do matter. Those of you who are in a classroom, who work with districts, you do realize that that's the bread and butter of getting anything done in a school district. And also, we're going to be specific on how we do set those goals and we define success for the education of our children. So here's the process that Dr. Cerisa is going to go over with you. Includes just a plethora of people within our community that help us educate our children. So we call them our thinking partners. And one of the things that we know through research is a lot of times higher education, elementary education, businesses, in many ways they work in isolation. And when we think about complex problems and we think about complex situations, the research states that we should be working together because we have different perspectives. And that's the beauty of America. That's the beauty of thinking, is when you have divergent thoughts and divergent lived experiences, you bring those together. That's when innovation and that's when problem solving actually happens. And so what Dr. Cerisa is going to talk about is the thinking partners that we engaged most recently in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how we were going to safely get children back to continue their education, recognizing that there's a lot we have to make up for. And so some of the partners that we engage, you see Hanover Research, one of the innovative research partners that we have coming out of the East Coast. We have Southwestern College, one of our junior colleges in our community, the YMCA, UC San Diego. We also had a representative from Assemblywoman Dr. Shirley Weber's office join us. And you also notice on the bottom, we had CopyLink, one of our business partners. We also had the Chula Vista Chamber of Commerce. And of course, we didn't want to forget our bargaining units, because those are the boots on the ground, really need to make sure that we're listening to all different voices within the community. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Dr. Cereza, but just wanted to give you an idea of the different thinking that we have in the room as we address these issues.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Tessier. So on the next slide, the Brain Trust protocol, as you can see, all those stakeholders that we had brought together, the protocol that we follow is called Brain Trust. And I believe this protocol was sort of came from the Disney Pixar world in terms of how do we solve dilemmas? How do we work together and solve dilemmas? And so the protocol that we use to follow, or that we follow to help us resolve the dilemma kind of goes like this. So we bring all of those stakeholder groups together. And in this particular case, the thinking partners that Dr. Tessier just shared with you were those from the outside of the organization. And so each of you engage your stakeholders in multiple ways. You bring your parents together, you bring teachers together, you maybe do thought exchange. I know that Lisette is going to go over some of that a little bit later. But this is an alternative way, an alternative protocol to engage stakeholders from the outside. So basically what happens in this presentation is we bring people together for about 90 minutes. In the presentation portion, where you see the presentation team, someone from the district, someone from our district is sharing with the group, and that group of stakeholders, what's some current data. So in this case, we were looking at a dilemma that was, how do we ensure quality instruction in classrooms with all of these parameters and safety guidelines in place? How do we do that? And so we shared some academic achievement data with the group. We shared some research. So prior to this group of people coming together, we had sent out some key research articles about quality instruction and responses to this crisis. And we also presented some possible scenarios of what learning might look like. And all of that was just to kind of spark the thinking, just to get people going before we jump into our smaller groups where we did some incredible conversation. So then we move into the clarifying question opportunity. So it gives the team some time to ask us some questions about what do we want, what are we looking for, where do we want to go. So we're getting all of that thinking ready to start sharing ideas and giving us some input. So then we move into a good 45-minute session of small groups of those stakeholders, really just talking about, you know, what if we could do this? Or what if the district really focused on these pieces? Or have they thought about doing it this way? And so we really just want to expand our thinking outside of our normal wheelhouse and get the perspective of what the community as a whole, even the business community, really being in touch with, you know, what their goals are for the community and what their needs are for the community, and having that bridge to education, especially in times like this, is so vital. So giving our community a voice using this protocol has been really effective. And then after that 45-minute small group session, we bring everybody back together. And of course, all of this is virtual. So the Zoom was really helpful in their small group teams to put all this together. So the groups came back together and shared their ideas. And as each group is sharing, there's more thinking and there's more ideas that are coming together. So it's truly an innovative way to think totally outside of the box in what we normally would have come up with. And so that's sort of the protocol, or the overview of the protocol in general. On the next slide, you'll see the dilemma for us, as I shared with you, was really in this particular session was how do we provide daily standards-based instruction to ensure that that's happening in classrooms with all of the parameters. And so the group that Dr. Tessier shared with you, that the stakeholder group, these were some of the prevailing themes that came out of that discussion. So the group really focused on the ideas of supporting social emotional needs with the students, the teachers, and the families based on everything that's happening and the responses to the trauma and everything that we've been through. Equity in ensuring that our neediest students are getting what they need to bridge learning gaps. Really looking at different instructional models, setting some clear expectations and consistency across our very big district for quality instructional practices, and of course, maintaining safety. So this is, again, just one method that we're engaging and listening to our community to help us make some important decisions for the upcoming school year for what we're going to do. So it's not the only thing we do, it's just one of many in our toolbox. And as Daniel was sharing in the folder, you'll have a full protocol there that if you're interested in using this protocol with your community, the full protocol is there for you to take a look at. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions on how to implement this protocol. We're happy to share it with you. We've had great success with it so far. And I think some people actually in this session were part of the thinking with us. So thank you to all of you who are with us who helped us with this particular session. So with that, I will turn it over to Mary Walters from Marietta, who's going to share a little bit about their work with the toolbox. Mary?
Good morning, everyone. Marietta Valley Unified School District is located in Southwest Riverside County. We have approximately 23,000 students and 20 schools. So thank you for if you could go back just a sec, thank you for the opportunity to share a few items regarding school reopening in the Marietta Valley Unified School District. We've been planning, collaborating, and working together since mid-March. And we are building a plane while flying just like all of you. So I'm going to share a little bit of information regarding communication with our stakeholders and building staff capacity. So if you could take me to the next slide. Thank you. As a result of our distance learning, we felt communication with and feedback from our stakeholders were critical, as well as our website. We have information on our website regarding the coronavirus and reopening learning models on our website, so you can see those two icons there. We've provided regular updates with our staff and families. Currently, we've done 22. Staff were always communicated before communications went out to our families. If you go to our website and click on the coronavirus link, you will find a list of the communications. Also, you will find sample letters as part of the Continuity of Learning Playbook for your reference, which Daniel shared at the beginning of the presentation this morning. Additionally, we have provided our families with 2 surveys so far. First was an anonymous survey on interest in the traditional, blended, and virtual models. And then we did a second survey with pre-registration so they could indicate their interest in blended or virtual. We've sent out a survey of staff as well on their interest in teaching of one of the models. So we took their first and second choices. And then with that, you see a couple of infographics. We felt that those were best to communicate to our families and staff. They provide information in an easy to read, clear and concise manner, in addition to the letters that we've sent out to our families. We've provided a district email that was sent with all of our communications, where parents could go to that email address and indicate questions or needs. And so we, through that email address, have been able to provide devices, hotspots, provide for health needs. My secretary actually manned that email. And so we were able to respond to those needs on at least on a 24-hour basis. Our human resources department had regular meetings with both unions to develop MOUs and discuss distance learning. We have work groups in place to discuss grading for distance learning. And then we felt that the communication was very good because our parents had expressed their appreciation and that we were responsive to their parent questions and needs. So if you could take us to the next slide. So as a result of all these communications, in our last communication that went out, we developed a timeline, and we let them know that as state mandates and guidance will probably change over many times, as we've seen before school opens. We feel that this timeline will help our families. We will be sending out a communication on July 9th with more detailed information on our learning models. Our plan is to provide traditional, blended, and virtual. At this time, we have about 3.5% of our families want virtual, 11% blended, and the remaining 85% or so are requesting traditional. Then you can see we have a timeline that will begin. We're sending another communication out to all of our families where they can register their students for blended or virtual learning. And that will close on July 24th. Then we will begin our ARIES portal and our documentation. That will open on July 27th. So our families can start their registration process. And our school sites will begin orientation on July 30th, and it's mostly going to be virtual with a few drive-through options. And then we hope for the first day of school on August 12th. So that's our communication timeline from here on out. Then our next slide is on building capacity. Beginning the mid to late October, San Diego County Office of Ed sent out a document on returning to school procedures. We took that document and adjusted it to our district. From there, we developed task forces in the areas of HR, facilities business, educational services, and Board of Education superintendent. The task forces have been meeting since the end of April. We've provided a wide spectrum of PD for our teachers to transition to distance learning, use of an LMS, synchronous and asynchronous instruction. We waited on providing live or synchronous instruction until after we felt teachers had a grasp of distance learning, which was approximately 2 weeks into distance learning. Currently, we have teachers taking the leading edge certification offered by Riverside County Office of Ed. We have approximately 580 teachers taking this training, and that's probably about 60% of our entire teaching staff. Additionally, we do have administrators taking the administrator modules. Haiku was our adopted LMS, but was no longer being supported through PowerSchool, and it wasn't elementary friendly. So as a result of that quick shift to distance learning, we felt that we needed a new LMS and decided that we needed to adopt so that way it could be utilized with all of our grade levels. And so we are going to be implementing Canvas coming up here in August. And currently teachers are transferring their information from Haiku to Canvas at this time. We continue to meet with both unions on return to school and all that it brings on a regular basis. We are in the midst of redesigning the district and school websites to ensure they are family and student friendly, as well as easy to navigate. And lastly, as we have seen, the things are ever changing and we will need to adapt. Nimbleness, it needs to be our middle name. And thank you so much for the opportunity to share. You have my email and our website, and we hope to build the plane while all of you are building. And I'm going to turn it over now to Lizette Diaz from Ontario Montclair School District.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank again all our partners, my colleagues from Chula Vista, as well as Marietta, and all of you out there listening today. So just want to underscore the theme is that we're all working through this together, learning from one another. I appreciate the playbooks in that, as Daniel shared, equity really runs through each of the sections. So from our district, we're going to be dipping into the assessment section of the playbook, which really identifies, as many have shared, how we engage with stakeholders, as well as how do we take this information and make it actionable. And then we'll also dip into the English learner section, which then addresses some of the equity gaps that we're identifying from some of our student groups. A little bit about our district. We're in Southern California. We're also an elementary school district, not as large as Chula Vista. We serve TK through 8th grade students. We have 32 schools, and as you can see from our demographics, a large portion of our demographics are Latino, low socioeconomic, and then a third English learners. Next slide, please. As we go into the assessment section, we'll be going into the 3 considerations. As I went through these playbooks myself as a district, I really appreciated going into it. It really validates the things that we're doing, but it also explored areas that maybe we hadn't really kind of gone through. So I'm going to be actually using the format of the playbook, which you see there, the first 3 sections. And so we'll go into each of those and you'll see how we've kind of taken that into our district. So next slide. Okay, so in well-being and safety, you know, how we arrived there is we've done, as many have done, 2 or more surveys. We've identified through the thought exchange, which you may or may not be familiar with, but it is a collaborative survey where participants interact with each other's thoughts, and it helps to really titrate top themes out of those robust surveys. So the first survey we did involved about over 3,500 participants, as you can see. And we identified 4 top themes. Really, our stakeholders' first and foremost priorities: health and safety, a social emotional need, technology access, equity, as well as academic and professional development needs. Our second survey then went into a little bit of a deeper probe to identify, of those areas, where do we begin? And we can't do everything at one time, but we can certainly do a few things very well. And so we took the opportunity for the second survey to go into a little bit more of that, which I'll talk about. Next slide, please. So from the lens of equity and access, like everyone else has shared, you know, so much of what we direct our stakeholders to get up-to-date information through our superintendent and through our distance learning portal, our videos are all accessible through our omsd.net. So that's available to you if you wish to go into a little bit more about what I'm speaking to directly. We had to kind of catch up real quick and get up to date with the Chromebook distribution. We shifted our mental health services resources for our students to an online model where we actually engaged over 1,300 counseling sessions as well as services. We offered the 2 summer school sessions to help remediate some of those gaps. Our surveys identified 3 learning options for our students when they return. Our families really would like to have some choice in how they would like their child to engage back with us. So a blended model, online as well as an independent. And we shifted quickly to a one-to-one device, and as well as providing hotspots. Again, making sure that all our students had equity and access to the resources. And as we go into some of the health and safety protocols, the return to school recommendations, we really worked with all our stakeholders to really identify what is it that we need to do to ensure the health and safety of our students, as well as stay on course with the recommendations that our task force provided. Lastly, we have a parent educational center where we partner with various external partners, and we had to quickly shift into an online modality to offer our parents and families workshops. And so in collaboration with the Mexican consulate from Riverside, San Bernardino County, CABE, we shifted really quickly to providing our family support virtually. Next slide. As we looked into the academic learning and progress sections, as you can see there, we're really trying to work with our school sites. We're trying to dive into the data and help them create their needs assessments to inform their new school plans. Again, it's all a new, ever-changing environment for them. So we want that to be part of what they're doing at a local level at their school site. We identified Elevation. We've been using that as our exclusive platform to really go into the assessment and make it actionable for our teachers to plan for instruction in the online as well as in the hybrid model. we're implementing a new assessment, MAP, ELA, and math assessments, to help identify some formative assessments. Again, to keep in mind of what gaps have students incurred while out, and what do we really need to focus and hit really quickly. As many have shared, we may be going back off should infection rates increase or the second wave hit. So we want to be really flexible on how we're using assessments to drive our instruction, both online as well as face-to-face. We're also leveraging our multi-tiered system of support implementation, and we're continuing with our cohort rollout. And so we're looking at this as an opportunity to muscle that MTSS structure, even through the ongoing changing times. How can we stay on point with equity access? How can we stay on point with what our students need? You know, that all means all, and recognizing that that's going to look different when we come back. And again, just aligning all our MOUs and everything to support our teachers through professional learning modules, as well as PLCs and curriculum and training. Next slide, please. That brings us into some of the equity conversation. And so as we look at this assessment and we recognize that English learners began with a gap prior to COVID, and we were already struggling with remediating that gap. So now with the shift through the COVID crisis, how do we look at those overarching considerations and examine what is going well, what isn't going well, and how do we flex that difference and make it alive in these new environments, when we know that our students may be on campus less time, or they may not necessarily have support at home to help them with a lot of what they normally would have at school. And I'm speaking specifically to like our newcomer families, or families that have Spanish or another language as a primary support. So we'll go into that, and we'll also explore how we're aligning our on-campus considerations for instruction and learning, as well as our off-campus considerations for instruction and learning. So next slide. So we're really focusing, and it's in our recommendations for our district, our task force. So we're really hitting English language development. What we learned through the crisis when we had to quickly shift is that we weren't prepared to look at how we're increasing the domains of listening and speaking precisely. And so we're really going to be shifting that to prioritize English language development alongside English language arts, identify learning outcomes for our students, again, using our Elevation platform, and really collaborating across the content areas. It's no longer just ELD by itself, but also leveraging that integrated ELD throughout all the content areas, so that students have as much opportunities to engage in language as possible. At the same time, we're using our existing systems, our assessment systems, to identify clear learning gaps. What gaps existed prior to COVID-19, and what gaps do we assess when they come back? So we can really work with our school sites on identifying specific English learner goals in their school plan, so they can be appropriately resourced and monitored and supported. The third segment that we're considering as well, and again, this is guided by the playbook, is how are we identifying professional development for our teachers, and how are we identifying ELS, parent support specifically. And so we're looking at, we're implementing Elevation strategies, professional development this year to help with that, again, on-site and online. We're also developing a virtual English learner parent back to school meeting. So one specific to our English learner parents, kind of a district-wide parent back to school meeting, and we're using our parents from our CABE Project to Inspire Level 4 classes to really spread the message, to really help that parent-to-parent connection, so that not only is the district doing this, but also our families are working with one another to help one another. Next slide. Next slide, yeah, thanks. As far as our on-campus and off-campus, we really don't see that separate. Like many have shared, we want that to be really tightly aligned. And so our ELD, ELA priority on both distance learning and our hybrid, our online and hybrid and independent practice mode options, we'll focus more than ever on listening, speaking, reading, and writing strategies to bring about that language development, that robust language development that we need our kids to experience specifically. Prior to COVID, we're actively doing EL shadowing walks. So I go to each school site and walk with the principal. We look at it from the perspective of the students learning. And this particular effort is informed by Ivana Soto's work on EL shadowing, but I've modified it just slightly. So there is a link to the sample form that I've created for you that I've created with our team that you're more than happy to use. But we're going to take that into the virtual platform. How can we shadow our EL students while they're participating in virtual learning? We've also structured our system so that we have an identified EL coordinator, so we can really quickly communicate and support them in their efforts at their school sites. And again, you can see that we've highlighted some of the things already, but just focusing on some of the newcomer support classes at the middle school, identifying ways we can support our newcomer students, particularly in this paradigm, as well as our long-term English learners with a specialized designated ELD at the middle school. So kind of a good wraparound support plan that we have in place. But that being said, we're just still learning and struggling with some of the key questions as to what it's gonna look like when we come back. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand this off to Dr. Carla Estrada.
Thank you so much. Just again, want to thank all of our partners in sharing your resources, sharing your reflections and learning. The Continuity of Learning Playbook really has been one in which it's been a partnership with our Riverside County Office of Education, our San Diego County Office of Education, and Copernicus, as well as district partners to really help us to know what is it that people are really interested in understanding more deeply as they're planning for distance learning or hybrid, which would be on-site and off-site, and how can we be able to share what those things are, pull out some of those resources, but really encourage you to go to the playbook. You will see lots of resources there, and we will continue to evolve as the needs evolve. And so please do, as Daniel shared, what are some of those things? I want to highlight our survey. Please do click on the survey, take a minute to provide us feedback. We've tried to make it as simple as possible because we really want to make sure that we are evolving in a continuous improvement process and making sure that we are being responsive to the needs of our LEAs. And so I just want to make sure that folks take a minute to do that. In a second, we're going to transition to some Q&A. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I will do my very best to go through them and ask our panelists to be able to share their thoughts on some of these questions. So I'm just going to start with one for Chula Vista. For Chula Vista, who synthesized the themes from the Brain Trust? How many sessions were held to arrive at those themes?
Okay, so great question. The themes that came out of that session was just one session. It was 90 minutes. So what we did during each of the small group sessions, we had a note taker in each session. And so we were able to collect the notes. And then we had an instructional team here who synthesized all of the notes and coded them based on the themes that came through. So that was just one, like I said, that one session on the instruction. Prior to that one, we had a brain trust that was more about safety and operations. And that group included a completely different set. Well, some of the participants were the same, but a different group of eyes that were helping us with that piece.
Thank you. Another question, really important one, I think. What have been some of your successes and challenges with holding virtual parent workshops? Mary, I'll throw it to you first, and then we'll go to other team members. But what are some successes and challenges in being able to do that?
Well, successes are that our parents are participating. You know, they're very engaged. When we sent out our first survey, our anonymous survey, we had over 10,000 people respond to that. So that was a good indicator of of their engagement in the process. I think the challenges are the connectivity, the types of devices, all of that. If you're trying to do Teams or Zoom meetings, some parents have that capability and others don't. So it does make it difficult.
Could folks add, for some of their families who maybe don't have email, what have been some strategies that you've used to make sure that they're staying informed or finding alternative ways to engage? I think, Lisa, you were sharing some of your partnership, for example, with Gabe and leveraging that relationship, but, any other ideas?
It truly came down to talking to our families and recognizing that we were all starting in different places. And so coming up to speed with technology was a challenge for us right at the beginning. But our families were so open, so receptive. They appreciated it so much. And once they did, it took off. And now they they're training each other on Zoom or working with Gabe to go to level 4 classes for our families on leadership, on parent leadership, and it's all virtually. Our families have just been so great along the process. So I would encourage districts to really just have authentic conversations with your families. Know that it's going to be messy. It's going to be kind of a hard transition, but with that where there's a will, there's a way. I think everyone's trying to get to the same point, and so really. Just working with your families as closely as possible really leverages a lot of momentum.
And just to add, I think utilizing social media and texting, it's a huge game changer instead of just email.
All right. Another question came up around if you could explain what Friday EL support is or looks like. Thank you. This is from an EL facilitator at Patriot High School.
Well, I don't remember. I think maybe I might have said a virtual Friday EL support. I'm not sure about the Friday EL support. So I'll try to answer it just generically. We've created EL coordinators at each site, and then we meet with them regularly, and we help them to identify areas of growth and support for their school sites. And that's where my team engages and either works with small teacher groups, or we work with the school or the principal to do EL shadowing walks, or we dive deeper into the Elevation platform and help them create reports to monitor the progress of their students. So it could be a multi-pronged, but that's kind of the EL support that we give to our schools as well. Our families, the virtual, we're going to try something new. We're going to have a virtual EL parent back to school night. And so it'll be a kind of a invitation for all our EL parents to get a lay of the land of what it looks like and what supports they might need for translation and computer and so forth. So it'll be guided more towards the EL student lens.
So could Ontario Montclair describe the protocol for the thought exchange? What does the share, rate, and explore thoughts mean?
Yeah, well, Thought Exchange, I wish I could take credit for Thought Exchange. I didn't invent it, but we contract with them. But Thought Exchange, you could look them up on the internet. They're a platform that what you do is you create a question, and then around that question, you send invitations to all your stakeholder groups. And then you have the stakeholder, once they go into the survey, they identify how they associate themselves. So you can disaggregate the data by a stakeholder group. And they basically share thoughts around that question. They might share 1 or 5. Once they're done sharing the thought, then the platform prompts them to star thoughts. It's kind of like Yelp review. So they'll assign 1 star to a thought that they might not agree with, and they might assign up to 5 stars on a thought that they highly agree with. The system then, so they're collaborating. They're gonna get random thoughts from all the participants just kind of taken to them. And then once they're done, you basically analyze the top thoughts. So really it just, the top thoughts go up through the system, and you're able to analyze which ones are most valuable for all stakeholders. And then that becomes our guiding plan to create the second survey that we did.
Thank you. I did want to ask a question on for our teachers. If panelists, so Dr. Tessier, I always get that, Tessier. Dr. Tessier, could you share more about how you've been engaging teachers? How do you raise those voices to the surface and make sure that those, as you shared, boots on the ground, really get to provide input? Love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, especially now where we want to make sure that we are hearing all of the voices. You know, you have a very diverse group of people educating our children, from, you know, people who may be more immunocompromised, or who may be in the age group where they're going to be more negatively impacted. So one of the things that we've done in our district is, typically contracts will dictate how many times throughout the year the district needs to consult with the teachers union on educational objectives. And one of the things that we've done in our district is, throughout this pandemic, we've actually met with our bargaining unit weekly. And so our contract states that we need to do it 10 times throughout the year. And I think we've probably tripled or quadrupled that during this time, because, you know, we really want to hear, what are the concerns? How is the professional development working? What do you need to move this forward? So one of the things that we saw right away was our teachers were utilizing Microsoft Teams. And so we were able to have a weekly dialogue with our teachers union, and saying, okay, this is the need. What is the professional development going to look like? And then we would get that professional development delivered to the teachers, and then we would ask for feedback. Is this meeting your needs? How is it going? So it's really been a blessing, I should say, because we're able to get live time feedback and make changes very, very quickly. And so one of the things that you definitely don't want to do at a district office level, as I'm sure all of you would agree, you don't want to have this robust plan and then all of a sudden unveil this plan with no teacher input. That's not going to go over well. So we like to just be really, really proactive. And I would, my best piece of advice in this type of situation that we have now is increase the level of communication. That really saves a lot of issues.
Can I just jump in really quick? In addition to what Dr. Tessier was sharing about weekly meetings with our bargaining units, another thing that we did during the time when we were doing distance learning, we created a survey for teachers and asked them, how can we support you? What are your needs? And we left that survey open. And so we were able to monitor their qualitative data, like what are their comments saying, how do we support them? So they had a constant line of communication directly to us, so that we could see from across the board what their needs were. So leaving that survey open gave each teacher an opportunity to provide their thinking, their needs, their voice, and then we could respond to that as well.
Thank you. We have another comment and question. How have you been keeping your LCAP Parent Advisory Committee and DLACs engaged through virtual committee meetings and updates? These parents are powerful partners and are able to offer constructive feedback on your distance learning initiatives. That's really open to anyone. I think I'll start you off, Lisette, and then we could jump to Mary or anyone else on the panel.
Yeah, I'll just quickly address. So prior to COVID, we were like everyone else, engaging all our parent advisory groups, our DLAC, our parent advisory groups at the district level, as well as sites, on developing our LCAP map. And so as a result of that, what came out was parent-to-parent trainings, a lot of parent leadership opportunities, and access to technology. And so from March till now, we've been developing kind of the framework around that. What is that going to look like when we come back? Training the parents on Zoom, identifying our parent leaders, training them through our Project Inspire. When we come back, we already have our plan to identify how we're going to construct our virtual meetings. So all our parent advisory groups, our GATE, EL, SPED, and our parent advisory group, all are going to use the same consistent Zoom protocol, Zoom interpretation, where to post meetings, because we anticipate those will be online. And we've also worked with our schools to identify protocols that they'll all use that's also consistent, and where to post their agendas one click away. So we're really helping develop that system, and we're ready to go when we come back to engage them robustly.
Thank you. Mary, any additional words? I know the learning continuity and attendance plan is something that folks are going to be working on, and the CDE will be putting out a template and some resources around that. But as you're thinking about that, how have you been leveraging some already established groups within your organization?
So we've continued our parent group meetings. We utilize Microsoft Teams. And so we've continued all those parent meetings in Microsoft Teams. Actually, some of our parents have said this is a whole lot easier than finding childcare and whatnot to be able to come to a district meeting. They can stay at home and have the meeting as well. So continuing to get their input and involvement, just like we did on a report to the community. So that will be our goal as soon as we have that template, is to involve all of our stakeholders so we can develop that plan.
And one of our last questions is how will the teacher lesson plan support the EL shadow walkthrough? I think that's a great process, the EL shadow walkthrough, because it really also does some student engagement and understanding of the student's perspective. Could you share a little bit more about how that then informs lesson planning?
Sure. Okay, so, you know, as everyone has an ELA, ELD adopted materials and curriculum. And that's aligned to the ELD standards. And so our EL Shadow Walk is also aligned to the ELD standards. So the teacher planning, the emphasis that teachers do with respect to designing ELD, both integrated as well as designated, they're using the ELD standards, and the EL Shadowing Walk also uses the ELD standards. So really it's seamless. And so we're just looking at the tool from what is the student actually producing in those domains that that are measured on the LPAC as well as on ELD. So that's kind of how we're using that. So they align really nicely. Like I said, if you go into the link and look at the tool, you'll identify how it's broken up by the ELD standards. So I'll just toggle it back to Carla.
Wonderful. Thank you. Again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you've taken a minute to provide some feedback on the survey. We've answered some questions, and I want to thank the panelists for your time to just be reflective, share your lessons learned and your tools and resources, and really, you know, modeling for us the different type of work that, you know, some of us are affirming that we need to do, but also some new ideas in which we could do this. I do want to just remind folks that within the playbook, the questions very much have come up around English learners. So know that there are some resources that we've curated and identified specific to our English learners. So please know that you can also find that, especially as you're thinking about the hybrid planning. Last piece, again, please make sure you complete the survey. Know that a lot of our resources are available online. And again, please make sure to complete that survey. I put the link there once again. Thank you to everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, thank you for joining us today.